Hi everyone, just wanted to start the video by saying that today we are starting off a new series on this channel. One where I go through a fundamental but technical concept of neuroscience with you and try to break it down into easy to understand chunks. With that said, let's get into the video. The year was 1952, when Alan Hodgkin and Andrew Huxley finalized their research into the squid neuron. This is a monumental moment in history. These two researchers have just finished developing the action potential theory. Over the next 50+ years, their findings will significantly influence not just science, but the world in general, as this was one of the foundations of modern computational neuroscience. And maybe more significantly to most people watching this video, this was one of the fundamental steps towards the development of artificial intelligence. But what are action potentials? Why are they so crucial to neuroscience that describing them earned Hodgkin and Huxley a Nobel Prize and a spot in the Science Hall of Fame? Let's find out.
The creation of a signal in a neuron is known in neuroscience as a spike or an impulse. These impulses are always the same, meaning that the cell is either off when it isn't spiking or on when a spike occurs. This is one of the reasons why brains are so often compared to computers, because neurons communicate in zeros and ones, just like computers do. The reason I'm talking about this is that the action potential is simply the technical name for these impulses. And as they are carried along the whole body of the neuron, they transmit information through an ingenious biological Morse code system.
To better visualize how they work, let's say that when walking around in your hometown you come across your childhood home. Certainly, that house brings back a lot of memories to you. When you see it, neurons in your brain start firing for multiple reasons. The important bit here is that whenever you see the house, the neurons that fire are essentially generating action potentials, and then passing those action potentials on to other neurons in their vicinity, this way generating a widespread response to seeing that house or a specific area of your brain. This is how memories, thoughts, emotions, and ultimately, who you will be as a person in that exact moment is created, all through the diffusion of these action potentials. Isn't that amazing? It is a process so simple, and yet it gives rise to such complex behaviors that to this day, neuroscientists still don't know how it works at a brain-wide scale, even though we know how these spikes are formed thanks to the action potential theory.
An action potential, as we understand it, originates from the difference in quantities of two specific ions existing on the outside versus the inside of the neuron.
One key insight here is that this difference occurs at specific parts of the membrane of the cell, meaning that one very specific part of the neuron will be having an action potential occurring, whilst its surrounding parts do not.
We call this difference polarization, and the two ions responsible for it are potassium and sodium. The reason this only occurs in specific parts of the membrane, one at a time, is due to the channels which allow for the transfer of the ions between the inside and the outside of the membrane. But you can expect a more in-depth video on this in the future.
For now, let's focus on the polarization of the membrane and how it changes over time.
You see, usually, this difference is at a resting state, in which the cell has a certain amount of difference between the two ions.
However, when a certain stimulus activates the neuron in some way, this difference starts to change, and once it reaches a certain level, known as the threshold potential, the membrane of the neuron is activated and starts taking in sodium. Once past this point, the action potential is irreversible, and the neuron will spike. The membrane is now in the depolarization stage. As the polarization levels continue to shift, this process can't obviously continue forever, as that would essentially break the neuron. Because of this, the membrane stops taking in sodium and works towards going back to its resting state by allowing
potassium to enter in a process called repolarization.
Once this process is also complete, there is a time span for which the neuron cannot fire again. It will just be resting. This functions to prevent the signal from propagating backwards towards parts of the neuron that have already fired. The time span during which this part of the membrane cannot spike again is called the refractory period. This can last between milliseconds to hours or even months. It really does vary from neuron to neuron. Now here is the important bit.
When the part of the membrane generates this signal, meaning it starts to take in the ions, it makes it so that its surrounding parts, which until then were simply resting, also start to take in sodium. This way propagating the signal along the neuron's membrane and carrying it towards other neurons through a process that we will explore in a later video.
Due to this process of propagation, the refractory period works to not allow the signal to be passed back to where it came from, ensuring it will continuously move forwards. Pretty genius if you ask me. So that's it. You now hopefully understand how neurons function at a very fundamental level. It is from this that every idea, every emotion, and every memory you ever had started. If you really think about it, we are nothing else other than these action potentials, which somehow occur simultaneously and in ways that allow us to think and have personalities. I hope I made this whole process clearer to you. And if not, please do let me know in the comments. If you liked the video, leave a like and consider subscribing.